The woman nobody could explain. There are towns in Appalachia that disappear from maps. There are roads that locals stop using without ever explaining why. And then there are people. People whose names survive long after the truth about them has been buried. The story you're about to hear is about one of those people. In the autumn of 1889, there was a woman living alone near a place called Hollow Creek in eastern Kentucky. Her name was Lenora Blackwell. By then, she was 38 years old. She had been married 6 times, and every single husband had disappeared. Not died, not run away, disappeared. No bodies, no graves, no witnesses, no explanations. Just men who existed one day and were gone the next. The strange thing was that nobody accused her of murder. In most places, 6 missing husbands would have brought a hanging rope long before a 7th wedding. But Hollow Creek was not most places. People feared something else more. Something that lived beyond the creek. Something older than the town itself. Something nobody wanted to discuss after sunset. The story first reached the state authorities through a traveling preacher named Reverend Samuel Pike. Pike had spent 3 years moving through isolated mountain communities. He recorded local histories, family records, births, deaths, disappearances. When he arrived in Hollow Creek, he noticed something immediately. Nobody spoke Lenora's name after dark. Not because they hated her, because they were afraid. When Pike asked why, the townspeople gave different answers. Some said she was cursed, others claimed she was protected. A few refused to answer altogether. One old woman finally leaned close and whispered something that Pike later wrote in his journal. She said, "The mountain keeps taking her husbands, and she's the only one it lets come back." Those words bothered Pike enough that he included them in a report sent to Frankfurt. Months later, that report landed on the desk of a former Pinkerton investigator named Elias Boone. Boone was 52 years old, a practical man, a skeptical man. A man who believed every mystery eventually had a human explanation. He accepted the assignment immediately. By November, he was riding toward Hollow Creek. The town sat between steep wooded ridges. The forests were thick enough to block sunlight even during midday. Most houses stood far apart. Smoke drifted from stone chimneys. Dogs watched strangers from porches. Nobody smiled when Elias arrived. People simply watched, waiting, as if they already knew why he had come. His first stop was the church. The preacher showed him old marriage records. 6 marriages, 6 husbands, 6 disappearances. The dates stretched across 20 years. The pattern seemed impossible. Every husband vanished exactly 77 days after the wedding. Not 70-6, not 78, 77. The odds alone made Boone uneasy. Then he discovered something stranger. Each missing husband had left behind writing, letters, diaries, notes, and every one contained nearly the same sentence. Different handwriting, different wording, same meaning. "Last night I heard someone calling from the creek." The first husband wrote it in a farming ledger. The second wrote it in a letter. The third scratched it inside a hunting journal. The fourth wrote it in charcoal on a cabin wall. The fifth and sixth left similar messages. Always the creek, always a voice, always shortly before disappearing. Boone spent 2 days examining records. Then he finally met Lenora Blackwell. She lived in a weathered white farmhouse overlooking Hollow Creek. The house stood alone, no neighboring homes, no livestock, no children, no family, only silence. When she opened the door, Boone understood immediately why people remembered her. She wasn't unusually beautiful. She wasn't frightening. What unsettled him was how calm she seemed, as though she'd spent years carrying knowledge too heavy for anyone else. She invited him inside, served tea, answered every question without hesitation. She spoke about all 6 husbands, each one kind, each one hard-working, each one gone. When Boone finally asked whether she knew what happened to them, she stared out the window toward the forest. For nearly a minute she said nothing, then she spoke quietly. "You're asking the wrong question," Boone frowned. "What question should I be asking?" She looked directly at him. "The question isn't where they went." A pause. "It's why some people hear the creek." For the first time during the investigation, Boone felt genuine discomfort. Not fear, something else. the sensation that everyone around him knew part of the story, except him. He left before sunset. As he mounted his horse, Lenora called after him. Her voice sounded almost sympathetic. "Elias." He turned. She hesitated, then said, "Whatever happens, don't answer if something calls your name after dark." Boone almost laughed. Instead, he nodded politely, then rode back toward town. That night, he rented a room above the general store. Around midnight, he woke suddenly. No reason, no noise. Just awake. The room felt strangely cold. Moonlight spilled across the floorboards. For several minutes, he lay still, listening. Then he heard it, a voice, faint, very far away, barely audible, calling his name, Elias. The sound came from somewhere beyond the town, beyond the forest, beyond Hollow Creek. He sat upright instantly, his heart hammered. The voice came again, Elias, not threatening, not angry, familiar, because it sounded exactly like his dead brother. A brother who had died 20 years earlier. Boone froze. Every rational thought disappeared. The voice called again, and somewhere outside, deep within the darkness of the mountains, something answered. Elias Boone did not sleep again that night. The voice never returned, but neither did silence. Every creak of the building sounded deliberate. Every gust of wind against the walls felt like something testing the edges of the room. By dawn, he had convinced himself there was a reasonable explanation. Grief, memory, exhaustion. People heard familiar voices all the time, especially in lonely places. That explanation lasted until breakfast. An elderly store owner approached his table, carrying a cup of coffee. Without introducing himself, the old man sat down and asked a single question. Who did it sound like? Elias stared. What? The voice. The old man looked exhausted, as though he'd asked the same question many times before. Elias slowly replied, "My brother." The old man nodded. That's usually how it starts. A chill moved through Boone. What do you mean usually? The old man glanced toward the window. Hollow Creek never calls with its own voice. Then he stood and walked away. That afternoon, Boone visited the family of the first missing husband. His name had been Caleb Mercer. He disappeared in 1869. His younger sister, now an elderly woman, still kept his belongings. She produced a faded leather journal. Most pages contained ordinary farm records, weather, livestock, crop notes, nothing unusual. Then Boone found an entry dated 75 days after Caleb's wedding. The handwriting changed, not dramatically, just enough to feel wrong. The words read, "The voice sounds closer now. It knows things. Things I never told anyone." A second entry appeared the next day. "It stood beside the creek tonight. I could not see its face. I knew it, knew mine." Then the writing stopped. 2 days later, Caleb vanished forever. That evening, Boone followed Hollow Creek alone. The stream twisted through dense forest. The farther he walked, the quieter the woods became. Birdsong disappeared first, then insects. Even the wind seemed absent. After nearly an hour, he noticed something strange. The creek was flowing uphill, only slightly, but undeniably, water should not move that way. Boone crouched beside the bank. The current moved against gravity for several yards before disappearing beneath dark rocks. His stomach tightened. Then he saw footprints, fresh footprints, bare feet, leading into the water. No tracks returning. He followed them until sunset. That was when he found the cabin. The structure stood hidden among hemlock trees, old, abandoned, half collapsed. Someone had carved symbols into the doorframe, not words, marks, dozens of them, layered over one another, as if many people had returned repeatedly to leave warnings. Inside, Boone discovered a journal wrapped in oilcloth. The pages belonged to the fourth missing husband. The final entry was written on the 77th day of his marriage. The words were shaky, almost unreadable. "It isn't calling me anymore. It is becoming me." Boone felt his pulse accelerate. Suddenly a noise echoed from outside. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling the cabin, one step, then another, then another. Boone reached for his revolver. The footsteps stopped directly outside the wall. Silence followed. Then came a voice, his own voice. "Open the door, Elias." His blood turned cold. The voice repeated itself perfectly. Exactly. Not similar. Identical. "Open the door." Boone remained frozen. Then something scraped against the wood. Slowly, patiently, as though a fingernail dragged across the cabin wall. The sound continued for nearly 10 minutes. Then darkness swallowed the forest, and whatever had been outside moved away. The next morning Boone returned to Lenora Blackwell. For the first time she looked frightened. Not for herself, for him. "You heard it, didn't you?" she asked. Boone nodded. Lenora closed her eyes. "It knows your name now." That afternoon she finally revealed the truth. There had actually been a 7th husband. A man nobody in town remembered. A traveling teacher named Nathan Hale. He married Lenora secretly 22 years earlier. 77 days later he disappeared. But unlike the others, he left evidence. A map. Nathan believed something lived beneath Hollow Creek. Not beside it. Beneath it. He spent weeks exploring abandoned mine tunnels hidden inside the mountains. The map showed a network of passages extending miles underground. At the center, he marked a single location. A black circle. Beside it, he wrote, "The voices come from here." That night, Boone and Lenora entered the mines. The tunnels were older than any local records. Wooden supports had rotted away decades earlier. Yet something felt stranger than age. The walls were smooth, too smooth, as though countless hands had polished the stone. Hours passed. Then they reached the black circle's location, a cavern, massive, silent, and filled with water. The underground lake stretched beyond sight. The surface was perfectly still. No ripples, no movement, no reflections. Then Boone noticed something horrifying. The water wasn't reflecting them. It was showing different versions of them, older versions. Different clothing, different expressions, different lives. The reflections were wrong, and slowly, they were moving independently. Lenora grabbed his arm. "Don't look too long." Boone forced himself away. But one reflection remained, staring at him, smiling. Then a voice echoed across the lake. Hundreds of voices, thousands layered together. Every missing husband, every missing traveler, every missing hunter, all speaking simultaneously. One sentence. "We found what was calling." The lake began to ripple, and something enormous moved beneath the surface. The water erupted, not with a creature, with people. Dozens of pale figures rose slowly from the lake. Men, women, children, all motionless, all staring. Their faces were familiar. Boone recognized several from missing persons reports. People who should have been dead for decades, yet they weren't dead. Not exactly. Their eyes followed him. Their mouths moved silently. Lenora began crying. Among the figures stood her first husband, Caleb, exactly as he appeared 20 years earlier. No aging, no decay, nothing. He lifted one hand, not in greeting, in warning. Then Boone finally understood. The missing people had never been killed. They had been copied. Something beneath the mountain learned people the way a mirror learns a face. The copies remained. The originals vanished. The water split apart, and the thing emerged. Not a monster. Not human. A towering shape made from shifting faces. Thousands of faces. Each one belonging to someone who had disappeared. The creature constantly changed. One face replaced another every second. An endless collection of stolen identities. Boone felt his mind beginning to slip. The creature wasn't hunting. It was studying, observing, learning. Then the worst realization arrived. The creature had been active for centuries. Each disappearance added another face, another memory, another voice. The mountain wasn't haunted. The mountain was growing. The creature spoke, every voice at once. "Elias, then we remember you now." The cavern shook, the lake surged, and the ceiling began collapsing. Lenora grabbed Boone's arm. "Run." The tunnels exploded into chaos. Stone crashed around them. Water flooded passages. Darkness swallowed everything. Behind them, the creature continued calling, sometimes using Boone's voice, sometimes Lenora's, sometimes voices neither recognized. They ran for nearly an hour, never looking back, because every instinct told them the same thing. If they turned around, they would see something impossible, and it would follow them home. By sunrise, the mine entrance had collapsed completely. Thousands of tons of rock sealed the cavern, the lake, the creature. Everything, or so Boone hoped. Weeks later, he prepared his final report. Officially, he wrote that unstable tunnels caused the disappearances. No evidence existed for anything else. Nobody would have believed the truth. Lenora remained in Hollow Creek. She never married again, never left, never approached the creek after sunset. Years passed. The story slowly faded. The town survived. People moved on. Children grew up. Old witnesses died, exactly as mountain towns always do. Then, in 1907, Boone received a package, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. The image showed a group of miners standing beside a newly opened tunnel in West Virginia. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then Boone noticed one face. Nathan Hale, the forgotten seventh husband. Exactly the same age. Exactly the same appearance. No aging whatsoever. On the back of the photograph someone had written, "It found another mountain." Boone never told anyone about the picture. He burned it that night, or at least he believed he did, because 3 days later, the photograph appeared again, lying on his desk, completely untouched. The final entry in Boone's journal was written shortly before his death. Historians found it decades later. Only 3 sentences appeared on the page. "Last night, I heard the creek again. It is much closer than before. It knows where I live." After that entry, there were no more writings. No explanation. No farewell. No final report. Only an empty house, an open front door, and muddy footprints leading into the darkness. The tracks continued for nearly a mile, perfectly straight. Then they stopped, as though the man following them had stepped out of the world entirely. And somewhere beneath the mountains of Appalachia, something old gained another voice.